I have to say, I really kind of find it interesting that the Purge movies do incredibly well with each individual film, getting more and more successful as they go along. Now, I necessarily wouldn't say that this series is the best or even one of the best, even just top tier of the best of some of the amazing horror franchises and just horror films that we've been seeing over the last couple decades, at least the last decade, or, the beginning of the 2010 era or whatnot. Personally, I feel like a lot of other films kind of top it in terms of just sheer quality and also just kind of thought-provoking nature. But there's something very interesting about these films, and I feel like that's one of the reasons that people keep returning to them, even though I haven't necessarily seen them do anything that kind of pushes the limit or pushes boundaries other than things that we've already seen. I mean, you have the whole political aspect with the new founding fathers and everything that is really cool, but personally I just never really feel like that is something that pushes it to basically next level type of horror film or concept. It is kind of interesting seeing people kind of express the worst of themselves at least 1 or 12-hour period every year. I mean, it is like as much as movies can be completely and utterly figments of our own imagination, and whether or not that's even possible is something that was really interesting. But now I'm actually thinking about whether or not this series should actually continue, because if you have been following these films, you know that it told not necessarily a well-connected story, but a cohesive and connected story throughout the first 3 films. A lot of people were very disappointed with the first film being basically a home invasion film over this awesome premise that gives everyone the right to basically break into a home and with no repercussions on their part, basically making everyone that horror movie franchise stalking killer like Jason or Freddy or Michael Myers or any of the other people who have basically defined that trope. And honestly, I feel like that was really interesting. Personally, it's one of the reasons I thought the original film worked, but a lot of people wanted it to get bigger and more expansive. And I feel like the sequel really did that. It's one of the reasons the sequel is so awesome for a lot of reasons, and even better than the first one, because it actually got out on the streets and it kind of did everything that the first one promised, while also having these really nice undertones about how this might just be a corrupt government trying to make this look like it's successful year in and year out and everything, and keeping the people in line while also, tangibly helping the economy and everything. And personally, depending on what you think, I liked it for what it was, but I definitely think that the third film actually went a little too far in terms of actually portraying the whole political aspect of everything. And despite the way that ended with the fact that they were actually going back to, they were probably going to get rid of the Purge, but now there's basically national uprisings from everyone who was a fan of the Purge, or even just the de facto founding fathers. At that point, honestly, you don't really know exactly where it's going to go from there, but the whole political aspect and the way that film played out made it feel like the entire series basically just ended. So it actually is pretty interesting to hear that James DeMonico, I'm sorry if I'm getting that name wrong, but the guy who's basically written, produced, and directed all 3 of these films is now working on not only a 4th film, but also a TV series. And I feel like I'll leave the TV series for something a little bit later. Based on what he's talked about from it, it seems really cool. Honestly, I can't really wait to see that. I feel like that kind of concept is exactly what I've wanted from this series since the very beginning. Putting aside how good the second film was, or putting aside how interesting I thought the first film or just the entire concept is, the TV series is what really feels like this show could actually, or this premise, actually could explode in a really interesting way. But just talking for right now about the 4th film in the franchise that's going to come out sometime soon, personally, we've heard kind of rumblings about where they're going to take it. They're not necessarily sure. Basically they could go to the whole revolutionary aspect of this particular franchise and where the 3rd film left us off, or they can go back to the very first one, go back to the beginning and start telling its own story, maybe revolving around certain characters that could build to a whole nother trilogy, where we're basically left off where the first one set us up or whatever. I'm not necessarily sure. It would be kind of cool to do that, in my opinion. Honestly, either way they go with it, it feels like the next film is going to be the biggest of what we've seen. Like I've said, these films have actually been really big, really, getting bigger and bigger with each individual film. So we'll have to see. I think both those premises can create like the bigger, better option for them to go big or go home and create a whole new trilogy. But honestly, I'm just going to open up to you guys. Like, what do you guys want from Purge 4? Do you want them to go back in a prequel format where we actually get to see them kind of come into the Purge and start creating all the traditions and everything that we've seen throughout the entire films? Like, you know, the industry is building up, kind of telling that story where how people started kind of putting money into home advanced security systems from the first film, or, you know, what's the meaning behind the flowers that they put out to basically show solidarity but not necessarily participating. Why do rich people basically feel the need to purge, and you basically pay poor people's families for the right to kill one of their own people? I mean, there's a lot of philosophy there and a lot of interesting concepts that I feel like they could really expand upon. And if they go back into a particularly just going back and kind of exploring how this history and the traditions and all the, the precedent for everything that we saw in the last three films kind of got started and was built up to the point where the next trilogy or the next handful of films basically bring us to the point that where we started in the original film. Or if they just decide to go, you know, straight forward into the future, then you basically have complete anarchy and chaos and everything. You know, honestly, the second film is named Anarchy, so maybe that was, you know, just thinking ahead, maybe they should have kept that title for themselves, but, you know, whatever. Personally, I feel like it would be interesting to see where they go after election year, but I would really like for them to actually go back in time. So that way we're not necessarily connected to anyone, and we can see how this basically started before it got, like, you know, super ritual culty or something. Back when this was actually something of an idea where people could go back and like, oh yeah, this was totally necessary for our economy and for our prosperity as a nation and everything, and show basically leading up to that, and then basically for like the last half of the film, or even the third act in general, just showing the rampage of it. Maybe just following a character leading up to it and showing how awful and everything the United States was during that time before the Purge, and just having a ramp up, like an amazing huge third act where like basically this guy's running around and you see all the rampage and killing and everything, and then everyone wakes up the next day, and even though everything is completely like all kind of messed up and everything, he's alive, and the economy you see kind of jump forward like a year into the future, and everything's a lot better than it was, and basically setting us up for, you know, however many films they want to do, or however long this actually can like run. I'm not necessarily sure how long this premise will go, but, you know, for most horror films, like it doesn't necessarily get old. I mean, they can keep doing weird and wacky things for as long as they want, and people will still come, because it's not like seeing Jason or Michael or Freddy. Well, Freddy wasn't really one of them, but, you know, Jason or Michael basically going around and stabbing people and being the tall, dark stranger type of thing, honestly. So, I mean, obviously they can keep doing Purge movies for as long as they want, as long as they keep them interesting. So anyway, guys, I'm just going to leave it at that. Tell me what y'all think about this in the comment section below. Do you want more Purge movies? What do you want from Purge 4 or the TV show? Do you want me to talk about the TV show in the future? Make sure to leave those thoughts in the comment section below. Anyway, guys, I'll catch y'all later. Bye.